My name is Charmaine. I am 35 years old and somehow still healing from wounds my family inflicted. As a successful software developer, I escaped their toxicity but maintained occasional contact. Last Sunday, they invited me to an upscale brunch to catch up. Between mimosas and avocado toast, my mother leaned forward, smirking. You know, Charmaine, you are lucky we even include you. Pity goes a long way. I simply sipped my coffee and smiled. That night, I logged in, disabled every family credit account, and emailed my lawyer about selling the cabin. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. Growing up in Fairfield, Connecticut meant privilege to outsiders. But inside our sprawling colonial home, emotional coldness permeated every corner. Our four-bedroom house with its manicured lawn and heated swimming pool was a fortress of expectations I could never quite meet. My childhood bedroom, painted pale blue at my mother Elaine's insistence, despite my preference for green, became my sanctuary and my prison. From elementary school through high school, I maintained straight A's, joined honor societies, and did everything humanly possible to earn a fraction of the warmth my parents freely showered on my younger sister. But that brunch and the canceled credit cards were merely the final consequences of a war that reached its boiling point exactly 2 weeks earlier. The real explosion happened on a Saturday night at the most exclusive country club in our state. My parents, Harrison and Elaine, were hosting a lavish charity gala to celebrate my sister Kiara. The invitations were embossed in gold foil, demanding $1,000 a plate from the wealthiest members of our community. The event was entirely dedicated to funding Kiara's so-called Ghana medical mission. To the outside world, my sister was an absolute saint. She was paraded around as a brilliant surgeon who had supposedly given up a lucrative private practice to build clinics in impoverished villages. I sat at table number 1 directly below the massive crystal chandelier, feeling the familiar weight of my family's judgment. I wore a tailored black evening gown, sitting quietly next to my husband, Julian. Julian is a forensic pathologist for the state. He is a brilliant, quiet man who notices absolutely everything. He held my hand under the table, his thumb tracing soothing circles on my skin, knowing exactly how much I hated these family spectacles. Up on the brightly lit stage, Kiara was delivering the performance of a lifetime. She wore a modest silk dress, her hair pulled back into a simple bun to emphasize her role as the selfless savior. She gripped the microphone, her voice trembling with perfectly timed emotion. I want to show you all why your generous donations matter tonight, Kiara said, wiping a single delicate tear from her cheek. The ballroom lights dimmed, and the giant projector screen behind her illuminated the room. A collective gasp echoed from the audience as an X-ray image appeared on the screen. It showed the devastatingly shattered bones of a human leg. This is little Kofi, Kiara continued, her voice breaking. He is a 7-year-old boy who suffered a severe bone infection after a farming accident in his village. When they brought him to my clinic, the local doctors wanted to amputate. They said there was no hope. But thanks to the funds we raised last year, I was able to perform a 12-hour reconstructive surgery. Today, Kofi is walking again. The ballroom erupted into deafening applause. Wealthy donors were already reaching for their checkbooks, wiping their own eyes. My mother Elaine, sitting directly across from me, clapped so hard her diamond bracelets rattled. She turned her sharp gaze toward me, her lips curling into a condescending smirk. You could learn a thing or two from your sister Charmaine, Elaine whispered loudly enough for the neighboring tables to hear. Kiara is out there saving lives, doing the Lord's work. Meanwhile, you sit behind a computer screen writing code and hoarding your software money. It is a shame you do not have an ounce of her compassion. I suppose being a greedy capitalist is all you are really cut out for. I tightened my grip on my crystal champagne flute, preparing to raise it to my lips to hide my frustration. I was about to take a sip and let the insult slide, just like I had done for 35 years. But I never took that sip. Julian suddenly leaned closer to me. His body had gone completely rigid. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers pressing firmly into my skin to stop me from drinking. I looked at him, startled by the intensity in his dark eyes. He was staring unblinking at the giant projector screen. Charmaine. Look at the screen, Julian whispered, his voice dangerously low and tight. Look at the top left corner of that X-ray. I squinted at the glowing image of the shattered leg. There were faint, almost microscopic serial numbers and a medical examiner watermark barely visible against the dark background of the film. I do not understand, I whispered back, confused. What am I looking at? Julian leaned his mouth right next to my ear, his breath hot against my skin. Something does not add up. That is not an infected leg from a farming accident in Africa. That is a forensic sample. I know this because I personally autopsied that body 2 years ago in Chicago. That patient was a 32-year-old man who died from a point-blank shotgun wound to the femur during a gang dispute. Your sister is lying. Check her story. I froze. The blood drained entirely from my face. The booming applause of the country club faded into a muted, ringing buzz in my ears. I stared at the screen, then looked back at Kiara, who was bowing humbly to the standing ovation. Her husband Desmond was standing off to the side of the stage, grinning like a predator and clapping his hands. Desmond was the chief financial officer of her charity. He managed all the money. A cold, horrifying realization washed over me. If Kiara was lying about the surgery, if she was using stolen forensic X-rays to solicit donations, then where were the hundreds of thousands of dollars actually going? The applause finally died down, and the servers began bringing out the main courses. Kiara stepped off the stage, immediately swarmed by wealthy socialites, handing her checks and praising her sacrifice. I watched her perfectly manicured hands gladly accepting the envelopes. "Excuse me," I said to my mother, pushing my chair back from the table. "I need to use the restroom." I did not wait for her snide response. I walked quickly across the ballroom, my eyes locked on my sister. I waited until Kiara excused herself from a group of adoring fans and slipped down the quiet carpeted hallway leading to the VIP lounge. The hallway was empty, lined with expensive oil paintings and heavy velvet curtains. I followed her, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I turned the corner, I saw her standing alone in front of a gilded mirror, reapplying her lip gloss. The fake humility was completely gone from her face. She looked deeply satisfied, admiring her own reflection. "Kiara," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet corridor. She turned around, annoyed at the interruption. "Oh, Charmaine. I am surprised you are still here. I figured you would have left by now since no one is paying attention to your boring software company." I walked slowly toward her, stopping just a few feet away. I did not raise my voice. I did not yell. I just looked her dead in the eyes. "Who is the boy on the screen, Kiara?" I asked, my tone ice cold. My tone ice. She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "I literally just gave a whole speech about him. His name is Kofi." "No, it is not." I took another step closer. "My husband is a forensic pathologist. He recognized the X-ray you just showed to 300 people. It belongs to a homicide victim from Chicago, dead for 2 years. So I am going to ask you one more time. What exactly are you doing, and where is all this money going?" For a fraction of a second, the mask completely slipped. The color vanished from Kiara's perfect face. Her blue eyes widened in genuine, unfiltered panic. She looked like a cornered animal. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her chest began to heave as she realized her massive, carefully constructed lie was unraveling right in front of the sister she despised. But before Kiara could formulate a single lie, the heavy wooden door of the hallway swung open. My mother Elaine stormed in her heels, clicking aggressively against the marble floor. She took one look at the scene, saw Kiara's pale face, and immediately drew her own conclusions. "What is going on here?" Elaine demanded, inserting herself firmly between me and my sister. "Mom." Kiara whimpered, instantly turning on the tears. The panic on her face vanished, replaced by the flawless performance of a victim. "Charmaine cornered me. She is accusing me of stealing money. She is trying to ruin my night just because she cannot stand to see me succeed." Elaine's face twisted in absolute fury. She turned to me, her eyes blazing with a hatred so deep it took my breath away. I opened my mouth to explain. "Mom, listen to me. The X-ray she used is a fake. Julian recognized it as, I never finished the sentence. Elaine raised her hand and slapped me squarely across the face. The sharp, stinging crack echoed loudly in the quiet hallway. The force of the blow snapped my head to the side. My cheek burned with sudden, intense heat. I stood there completely stunned, tasting a faint metallic hint of blood where my teeth had caught the inside of my lip. "You jealous, spiteful creature," my mother hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You cannot stand it, can you? You cannot stand that your sister is a beautiful, giving doctor, while you are nothing but a cold, calculating machine. You will never be half the woman she is. If you ever harass the guest of honor again, I will make sure you never step foot in our home or our church for the rest of your miserable life." She grabbed Kiara by the shoulders, wrapping her arms protectively around the golden child. "Come on, sweetheart," Elaine cooed softly. "Let us go back inside. People are waiting to give you their donations." I stood alone in the hallway, my hand slowly rising to touch my burning cheek. I listened to their footsteps fading back into the ballroom. The initial shock began to wear off, replaced by something entirely different. A deep, cold, calculating clarity settled over my mind. They thought I was just a jealous sister. They forgot that I build software systems designed to track missing data and uncover hidden financial discrepancies. They forgot exactly who they were dealing with. I took a deep breath, letting the coolness of the hallway settle my racing pulse. Before I could even turn toward the exit, heavy footsteps echoed from the ballroom entrance. It was my father, Harrison. He was a towering man, a former corporate executive who ran our family like a ruthless boardroom. He marched toward me, his jaw set in a hard line, his expensive tuxedo perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders. I expected him to ask what had happened. I expected at least a flicker of concern for the red mark blooming across my left cheek. Instead, he grabbed my upper arm with a grip tight enough to bruise the skin. "What is wrong with you?" he hissed, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated in the quiet corridor. "Your mother just told me you are back here harassing your sister, making wild accusations and trying to ruin the most important night of her career. You are a disgrace, Charmaine. I have tolerated your distant attitude for years, but I will not allow you to sabotage this family." I tried to pull my arm away, but his iron grip only tightened, his fingers digging into my muscle. "Dad, listen to me. Kiara is lying to all of you. Julian saw the X-ray. It is a fake. She is using a forensic photograph of a murder victim to scam these people. She is not performing any surgeries." Harrison did not even blink. He did not care about the truth. He only cared about the optics and the immense social capital the charity brought him. "I do not care what your husband thinks he saw," Harrison sneered, leaning in close until I could smell the strong mint on his breath. "Kiara is the face of this family. She brings us prestige. She brings us connections with people who matter. You bring nothing but your bitter, solitary attitude. Now you are going to walk back into that ballroom with me, and you are going to fix this absolute mess. You are going to make a public show of support for your sister right now, or so help me, I will dismantle everything you care about." I scoffed, finally yanking my arm free with a violent jerk. "You cannot force me to do anything. I am an adult, and I do not need your approval anymore. I am leaving." I turned my back on him, fully intending to walk out the side door, but his next words stopped me dead in my tracks, freezing the blood in my veins. "Julian is up for the lead forensic consulting contract with the state next month, is he not?" Harrison asked casually, adjusting his silk tie, as if we were discussing the weather. I slowly turned back around. My stomach tied itself into a heavy, cold knot. My father played golf every Sunday with the governor, the state medical examiner, and the chief of police. He sat on multiple advisory boards. He had the unchecked power to make or break political careers with a single phone call, let alone a forensic pathology contract. "Leave Julian out of this," I said, my voice shaking with a sudden, fierce anger that I could barely contain. "He has worked for years for that promotion. He is brilliant at what he does. It has absolutely nothing to do with you or Kiara's fake foundation." "It has everything to do with me," Harrison replied, his eyes completely devoid of warmth. "You have two choices tonight, Charmaine. You can walk out those doors right now, and I personally guarantee Julian's contract will be shredded and thrown in the trash by Monday morning. I will make sure he never consults in this state again. Or you can walk back to table number 1, smile for the cameras, and make a sizable public donation to the Ghana medical mission. Show everyone in that room that despite your obvious pathetic jealousy, you still support your own blood. He was blackmailing me. My own father was holding my husband's hard-earned career hostage to protect my sister's fraudulent charity. The injustice of it burned in my chest a suffocating heat that threatened to overwhelm my senses. But I thought of Julian. I thought of the countless nights he spent studying case files at the kitchen table, the absolute dedication he poured into seeking justice for victims. I could not let my toxic family destroy his life's work just to punish me for asking questions. Fine, I whispered the single word, tasting like bitter ash in my mouth. Harrison smiled a cold, victorious smile that made my skin crawl. Good girl, $50,000 should adequately cover your bad behavior. Let us go. He placed a heavy, controlling hand on the small of my back, practically shoving me down the hallway and back into the glaring lights of the ballroom. The charity auction was in full swing. The massive room was buzzing with the sound of clinking crystal glasses and wealthy patrons shouting out bids for luxury vacations and designer watches. Harrison guided me directly toward the main stage where Kiara and her husband Desmond were holding court. Desmond was holding a sleek, wireless credit card terminal, enthusiastically swiping donations from a line of eager, wealthy guests. When he saw my father and me approaching, his eyes lit up with a malicious, knowing gleam. Attention, everyone! Harrison boomed, his deep, authoritative voice carrying effortlessly over the noisy crowd. He grabbed a silver microphone from the podium. The room gradually quieted down, turning their complete attention to the patriarch of the family. Tonight is about giving back. It is about supporting the selfless, tireless work of my beautiful daughter, Dr. Kiara. But charity begins at home. I am incredibly proud to announce that my eldest daughter, Charmaine, has decided to make a special surprise contribution to her sister's mission. She is pledging $50,000 tonight to help build the new clinic wing. The ballroom erupted into deafening cheers and applause. People at the nearby tables turned to me, smiling and nodding in profound approval. They thought they were witnessing a beautiful, touching display of sisterly love and family unity. They had no idea I was standing there with a burning cheek, swallowing my pride, with a metaphorical gun held to my head. Elaine sat at her prominent table, dabbing her eyes with a linen napkin, playing the emotionally overwhelmed mother flawlessly. Kiara stood on the stage, her hands clasped delicately over her heart, looking at me with wide, innocent eyes. But underneath that angelic expression, I saw the triumphant sneer she reserved only for me. Desmond stepped forward, holding out the black card reader. He was wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo that easily cost more than my first car, garments undoubtedly bought and paid for by the very charity funds he was supposedly managing for the poor. Thank you so much for your incredible generosity, Charmaine, Desmond said smoothly, his voice dripping with thick, fake sincerity. We accept all major credit cards, of course. I looked past him to the floor where Julian had stood up from our table. His fists were clenched tightly at his sides, his jaw set in rigid anger. He knew exactly what was happening. He knew I would never give these vile people a single dime willingly. He started to walk toward me, ready to intervene, ready to throw his own career away to protect my dignity and stop the extortion. I caught his eye and gave my head a tiny, imperceptible shake. I could not let him do it. I had to protect him. I opened my designer clutch and pulled out my heavy metal black card. My hands were remarkably steady, though the blood roaring in my ears was practically boiling. I handed the card directly to Desmond. He took it with a slick smile and slid it swiftly through the machine. The terminal beeped approvingly, verifying the massive transfer of funds. Desmond handed the card back along with a long printed receipt. As I reached out to take the slip of paper, he leaned in just an inch closer, so no one else could hear. Better luck next time, sis. Desmond whispered, his hot breath smelling strongly of expensive scotch. He gave me a slow, exaggerated, mocking wink that made my stomach turn. I took my card, turned on my heel, and walked straight toward the exit without uttering a single word. I did not look at my father. I did not look at my mother. I just walked, my head held high, my posture perfectly straight. until I pushed through the heavy glass doors and out into the cool, refreshing Connecticut night air. Julian was right behind me, his strides long and urgent. He tossed the valet ticket to the attendant and turned to me, his eyes blazing with protective fury. "I am going to kill him," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave with pure rage. "I am going to walk back in there and break Harrison's jaw." "Charmaine, why did you do that? $50,000. I do not care about the state contract. I only care about you." "I know," I said, softly reaching out to touch his tense arm. "And that is exactly why I paid it. Because they think they won. They think they put me in my place and bought my silence. Let them celebrate, Julian. Let them get drunk on their own arrogance. They just made a $50,000 mistake." The valet pulled up with our car. We got in the heavy doors, shutting out the sounds of the country club. The drive home was completely silent, the tension thick and heavy in the dark cabin of the vehicle. But it was not a defeated silence. It was the calm, calculated quiet before a massive, destructive storm. When we finally arrived at our house, the digital clock on the dashboard read midnight. Julian headed upstairs to check on our 5-year-old daughter, who was sound asleep under the watchful eye of the overnight babysitter. I did not go upstairs. I walked straight down the hall into my home office, closed the solid oak door, and firmly locked it behind me. I turned on my modern desk lamp, casting a sharp circle of light over my massive dual monitors. My family thought of me as just a quiet, boring software developer. They grossly misunderstood what I actually did for a living. My company built the highly secure encrypted auditing platforms used by the largest healthcare networks and insurance conglomerates in the country. We tracked insurance fraud, billing discrepancies, and phantom patients. My administrative access levels bypassed standard public registries and tapped directly into federal medical compliance databases. I hunted white-collar criminals for sport. I sat down in my leather ergonomic chair and woke up my computer. The screens flared to life, reflecting brightly in my eyes. I opened my proprietary secure portal and logged in using my complex multi-factor authentication keys. "Let us see exactly who you are, Dr. Chiara," I muttered quietly to the empty room, my fingers flying rapidly across the mechanical keyboard. Every single licensed medical professional in the United States is issued a National Provider Identifier, commonly known as an NPI number. It is a unique 10-digit identification number used universally for billing, tracking, and verifying credentials. Without a valid active NPI, you cannot practice medicine, you cannot legally write prescriptions, and you certainly cannot solicit tax-deductible medical charity funds from the public. I pulled up the Federal Directory interface on my left monitor. I typed in my sister's full legal name, her date of birth, and her supposed graduation year from medical school. I hit the Enter key and waited. The system took less than 3 seconds to query the massive national database. A profile popped up on the screen. Chiara's name was there alongside a registered address in Boston, where she had supposedly completed her surgical residency. I moved my mouse and clicked on the administrative tab labeled Credential Status and Disciplinary Actions. The screen refreshed instantly. The standard blue and white interface suddenly turned stark, aggressive red. A large warning banner stretched across the entire top of the monitor. NPI suspended. Fraudulent credentials. I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes scanning the detailed confidential report generated directly below the warning banner. The documentation was absolutely damning. Chiara had not voluntarily left her residency to pursue noble charity work in Africa, as she had tearfully told my parents. She had been forcibly expelled from the program. Furthermore, the state medical board had permanently revoked her eligibility to practice after discovering a lengthy history of forged clinical hours and stolen hospital prescription pads. She was not a doctor. She had not been a doctor for years. Her entire existence was a carefully orchestrated fabrication. The $50,000 I had just swiped was not going to a pediatric clinic in Ghana. It was funding a massive illegal unregistered scam. And Desmond, her brilliant CFO husband with the smug wink, was the architect hiding the stolen money. I leaned back in my chair, staring coldly at the flashing red letters on my monitor. The stinging pain in my cheek from my mother's slap was entirely gone now, completely replaced by a cold, thrilling surge of adrenaline. They had demanded $50,000 to keep the peace and protect their precious image. They were about to find out that the truth was going to cost them everything they had ever valued. I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitors illuminating the thick stack of papers I had just printed. It was a 70-page federal dossier. It contained every suspended license, every disciplinary hearing transcript, and every fraud warning tied to Kiara's stolen medical identity. I placed the documents into a heavy leather binder. I knew exactly where I needed to go first to stop the bleeding. Our family attended Greater Light Fellowship, a mega church that functioned more like a country club. At the center of its 10,000 members was Pastor Sterling, a charismatic man controlling massive financial endowments. Pastor Sterling planned to present Kiara's foundation with a $200,000 grant this Sunday. I thought undeniable proof from a federal database would make him halt the donation and distance the church from scandal. I parked and walked through the doors. I had demanded an emergency meeting regarding the grant. Pastor Sterling's assistant escorted me into his lavish office smelling of expensive cologne. Pastor Sterling sat behind his desk wearing a tailored suit that cost more than most people made in a month. He smiled warmly, but his eyes remained sharp. "Charmaine, my dear," he said, gesturing to a plush leather chair. "It is always a blessing to see you, though. Your call sounded alarming. What is this urgent financial matter?" I did not waste time. I placed the leather binder on his desk and opened it to the bright red warning banner from the Federal Registry. "Pastor Sterling, the grant you plan to give Kiara must be cancelled immediately," I said steadily. "Kiara is not a doctor. Her medical license was suspended years ago for fraud. The charity is a front. The X-rays she showed were stolen forensic files. If you transfer that money, you will be funding a criminal enterprise and the federal government will subpoena your records." I expected outrage. Instead, Pastor Sterling did not even flinch. He slowly closed the binder, pushing it back toward me with a dismissive wave. His smile was replaced by a patronizing frown. "Charmaine, I am deeply disappointed in you." He sighed, leaning back. "I hoped the Holy Spirit would have softened your heart, but I see jealousy is still strangling your soul." I stared at him, completely baffled. "Did you not hear what I just said? I have federal documents right here. This is not a family squabble. This is wire fraud. These documents are nothing but printed pages." "You likely doctored yourself," Pastor Sterling said smoothly, his voice taking on the practiced, authoritative tone he used during his sermons. "You run a computer company. You know how to manipulate data. Desmond warned me you might try something like this." My blood ran cold. Desmond came to see you," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Desmond is a pillar of this community," Pastor Sterling replied proudly. "He came early this morning to pray for you. He told me how jealousy consumed you, how you humiliated your family last night, and threatened Kiara because you cannot stand that she does the Lord's work while you chase money." I felt physically sick. Desmond had beaten me here. He knew I would try to stop the church grant, so he had preemptively poisoned the well. And I suppose Desmond also offered the church a little financial blessing. During this breakfast, I asked, my tone hardening with sharp sarcasm, "How much did it cost to buy your loyalty, Pastor?" Pastor Sterling slammed his hands on the desk. "How dare you? Desmond and Kiara are true servants. They just pledged $50,000 to finally replace the church roof. They are building the kingdom while you are trying to tear it down. It was my $50,000. The exact money my father forced me to pay last night. Desmond used my money to bribe the pastor, securing the huge grant in return. It made me nauseous." "You are being played," I told him, standing up and grabbing my binder. "That money is stolen. When the authorities come knocking, and they will come knocking, your name is going to be right next to theirs on the indictment." "You have always been exactly like this, Charmaine, Pastor," Sterling sneered, standing up to meet my gaze. "You always want to ruin things for everyone else. You think you are the moral authority, but you are just vindictive. Need I remind you of Uncle David? 5 years ago, I discovered Uncle David embezzled funds for gambling debts. When I brought the evidence to our family, they completely turned on me. They called me a meddler, covered up his debts, and ostracized me. It was the exact same playbook they were using now. I told the truth about David, I said coldly. And I am telling the truth now. Your truth only brings destruction, the pastor replied sharply. You are toxic to the spirit of this congregation. Until you apologize to your sister and brother-in-law, you are removed from the church's elite business circle. I will notify the board today that your firm cannot bid on any church contracts, and you are barred from all networking events. Now get out of my office before I call security. I looked at the man who had baptized me when I was 12 years old. I saw nothing but greed and corruption hiding behind a clerical collar. Keep the roof, Pastor, I said quietly. You are going to need it when the storm hits. I turned and walked out of the opulent office, my heels echoing sharply against the hardwood floor. I ignored the pitying stares of the administrative staff as I pushed through the main doors and stepped back out into the harsh morning sunlight. My hands were shaking as I unlocked my car. The isolation was absolute. My parents had disowned my reality. The church had excommunicated me from my professional network. Desmond and Kiara had successfully weaponized my own community against me, painting me as a deranged, jealous woman trying to destroy a saint. I started the engine. I needed to get to my office. My firm was the only sanctuary I had left, the one place where logic and data still mattered. I planned to dive deep into Desmond's offshore accounts and build a case so airtight no bribe could save them. The drive into the city felt like a blur. I navigated traffic on autopilot, my mind racing with legal strategies. My firm occupied the ground floor of a modern commercial building in a tech corridor. It was a beautiful space with floor-to-ceiling glass windows letting in natural light. As I pulled onto my street, I immediately noticed the flashing red and blue lights. 2 police cruisers were parked in front of my building. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. My heart dropped into my stomach. I hit the brakes hard, threw the car into park, and sprinted right toward the entrance. The beautiful floor-to-ceiling glass windows of my office had been completely shattered. Jagged shards of thick, tempered glass littered the concrete sidewalk, catching the morning sun like broken diamonds. But the broken windows were not the worst part. I pushed past a police officer who tried to stop me, flashing my building ID badge. I stepped through the ruined entrance and stopped dead in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. The entire interior of my pristine office had been destroyed. Desks were overturned. My custom ergonomic chairs were slashed, but the true devastation was concentrated in the server room at the back. The glass door to the climate-controlled room had been smashed inward. Inside my heavy-duty data servers, the physical hardware that stored millions of lines of proprietary auditing code and client backups had been violently bashed with what looked like a sledgehammer. And poured over every single damaged server rack, every shattered monitor, and splashed violently across the white walls was thick, wet, incredibly bright red paint. It dripped slowly from the ceiling tiles, pooling on the expensive carpet like blood. "Ma'am, you cannot be in here," a detective said gently but firmly, grasping my shoulder to pull me back. "We are securing the crime scene." "Are you the business owner?" I could barely nod. My eyes were locked on the largest wall of the office directly above the reception desk. Smeared in the same dripping red paint, written in large, aggressive letters, was a single message: "Stop looking." I stood amidst the wreckage of the company I had built from the ground up. The smell of aerosol paint and shattered electronics filled the air. Desmond had not just beaten me to the church, he had sent a brutal, violent warning right to my front door. He thought destroying my servers would destroy my evidence. He thought the vandalism would terrify me into submission. He was wrong. He had just made it a war. I stood in my ruined server room, paint fumes burning my lungs. My phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. My stomach plummeted. It was an image of my 5-year-old daughter, Maya, playing on the swings at her private preschool. The photo was taken through the chain-link fence, zoomed in on her face. Underneath was a chilling caption: "Stay out of family business. Atlanta is dangerous for little girls." Pure terror washed over me instantly, followed by white-hot rage. Vandalizing my office was a business tactic. Threatening my child was a death sentence. I ran to my car, my hands trembling. I called Julian and told him about the text. His usually calm voice dropped into a terrifyingly quiet register. "I am picking her up now," he said. Go straight home. Lock the doors. By the time I pulled into our driveway, Julian was already there. Maya was sitting happily in the living room, oblivious watching cartoons. Julian met me in the hallway. I handed him my phone. He stared at the photograph, his jaw clenching hard. Desmond crossed an uncrossable line, Julian said softly. I have already made the calls. Within 2 hours, our house was transformed. Julian had deep connections in law enforcement and private security. A black SUV pulled up and 2 heavily armed contractors stepped out. They swept the perimeter and set up a surveillance hub in our guest room. One would shadow Maya, the other would stay with me. Julian did not stop there. He introduced me to Vance, a former federal agent turned private investigator. Vance sat at our kitchen table reviewing the text message. We do not just want to stop him, Julian told Vance. We want to dismantle his life, find out exactly where he goes, who he talks to, and where that charity money is sitting. Vance nodded and left. The next morning, the intimidation tactics escalated from criminal to financial. A courier arrived at my front door with a heavy parchment envelope sealed with wax. It was a formal summons from my father Harrison, a mandatory family meeting at his sprawling Buckhead estate. My attendance was not optional. I knew exactly what this summons truly meant for us. This was going to be my public execution. I dressed sharply. Julian wore a dark blazer. Our security detail waited outside the massive iron gates of my parents' estate. We walked up the stone steps and were led into Harrison's private study. The room smelled of old leather and suffocating arrogance. The extended family was gathered inside. Elaine sat on a velvet sofa sipping tea, refusing to look at me. Kiara sat in a leather chair, looking fragile. Desmond stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. He wore a tailored suit, looking completely relaxed. He caught my eye and gave a subtle tilt of his head. The man who threatened my daughter was masquerading as a saint. I wanted to rip his throat out, but I maintained my composure. Harrison sat behind his massive desk. He did not offer us a seat. He simply stared at me with eyes as cold as flat gray stones. You have crossed every conceivable boundary. Charmaine Harrison began, his voice echoing in the large, quiet room. I asked you to be a supportive sister. I asked you to let go of this demonic jealousy that has clearly consumed your mind. Instead, you marched into our church, harassed Pastor Sterling, and tried to poison the very foundation of Kiara's life-saving work. You are trying to destroy the family name. I am trying to protect the family name, I countered smoothly, keeping my voice perfectly level. Desmond destroyed my servers yesterday. He sent a threat to my daughter. Are you really going to sit there and pretend this is about jealousy? Elaine gasped loudly, placing a hand over her heart. Listen to her lies, she cried out. Desmond was at the church praying for you yesterday morning. He would never do such a thing. You are completely delusional. Harrison slammed his hand flat against the desktop. The loud smack made everyone in the room jump, except for Julian and me. Enough, Harrison bellowed. I will not listen to another word of these psychotic fabrications. I warned you, Charmaine. I told you what would happen if you continued this crusade against your own blood. He pulled a thick legal document from his desk and threw it onto the mahogany surface. This is my revised will and the updated family trust, Harrison announced with absolute finality. The trust is currently valued at $5 million. As of today, you are permanently written out of it. You will not receive a single cent. Your inheritance will be reallocated directly to Kiara's charity, where it will be used for actual good, rather than fueling your bitter existence. You are no longer a beneficiary. Silence hung heavily in the room. They all watched me, waiting for the breakdown. They expected tears. They expected me to beg, to apologize, to retract my statements in a desperate bid to reclaim my millions. They thought money was my ultimate weakness because it was certainly theirs. I looked at the legal document, then at my father without blinking. Keep your money, Harrison. It is tainted anyway. If you want to blindly hand your legacy over to a fraud, that is your mistake to make. But do not expect me to mourn the loss of funds I never needed. I built my own wealth. You cannot control me with a trust fund. Harrison's face flushed. He hated that his ultimate weapon had failed to break me. Kiara, clearly sensing the shift in power, decided it was time for her final theatrical performance. She stood up from her chair, holding a beautifully wrapped package tied with a silk ribbon. "Charmaine," Kiara said, her voice dripping with fake syrupy sweetness. "I do not hate you. I really do not. I know you are deeply unwell. But I cannot let you keep spreading these horrible rumors about my medical background. It is hurting the children I am trying to save. So I brought you a gift. I want you to have this so you can finally find some peace and accept the truth." She walked slowly across the Persian rug and handed me the package. I did not take it. Julian reached out and calmly accepted it on my behalf. He untied the silk ribbon and pulled away the expensive wrapping paper. Inside was a large, ornate mahogany frame. Beneath the polished glass was a pristine, officially stamped medical license. It bore Kiara's full name, a graduation date, and the shiny gold foil seal of the State Medical Board. It looked incredibly official. It looked perfect. "This is a certified, notarized copy of my medical license," Kiara said proudly, turning to look at our parents for their beaming approval. Elaine smiled, dabbing away a proud tear. "I hope this finally puts your ridiculous accusations to rest, Charmaine. You can hang it in your office." "Oh, wait. I heard you had some vandalism issues. That is so unfortunate." Desmond smirked. I kept my face blank, though the fury inside me was a raging inferno. Julian held the heavy frame in his hands. He did not look angry. In fact, he looked mildly amused. He adjusted his glasses, holding the document up to catch the light streaming in from the large study window. He studied the paper with the meticulous surgical precision of a man who spent his life analyzing microscopic evidence. "This is beautiful," Kiara, Julian said quietly. "The framing is exquisite, top-tier work." Kiara lifted her chin. "Thank you, Julian. I am glad at least one of you is willing to look at the facts." Julian tilted the frame, slightly tapping his index finger against the shiny gold foil seal pressed into the bottom corner of the document. "Yes, the facts. It is a very convincing document. The font is correct. The signature of the board director looks highly accurate. There is just one tiny, unavoidable problem." "What problem?" Harrison demanded. Julian locked eyes with Kiara. "The watermarked state seal embossed on this paper features the signature of Governor Thomas Bradley. He retired 10 years ago and passed away 3 years ago. The State Medical Board updates their official paper stock every election cycle. If you are going to pay someone to forge a federal license, you really should make sure they do not use outdated template paper from a decade ago. It is incredibly sloppy work." Kiara's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Desmond took a quick, uneasy step forward. My father stared at the frame in Kiara's hands, undeniably confused. I smiled. "Check your sources next time, Doctor. Come on, Julian. We are done here." We turned our backs on the stunned room and walked out. The battle lines were drawn. We drove away from the Buckhead estate in complete silence. The heavy wrought iron gates closed behind us physically and symbolically, sealing off the only family I had ever known. I did not shed a single tear for the $5 million I had just lost. My father believed stripping me of my inheritance would break my spirit. He believed the threat of financial ruin was the ultimate weapon because it was the only thing he truly worshipped. But to me, that money was nothing more than a heavy, rusted chain they had used to control my behavior my entire life. Now that chain was completely broken. I felt lighter and more dangerous than I had in 35 years. Julian reached across the center console of the car and took my hand. His grip was warm and incredibly grounding. He did not ask if I was okay. He knew me better than anyone in the world. He knew I was not grieving. I was calculating. When we got back to our house, the private security contractors were still stationed outside securing the perimeter. Our daughter Maya was safely asleep upstairs. I walked past the kitchen and headed straight down the stairs into our finished basement. I did not have a corporate office anymore, thanks to Desmond and his sledgehammer, but he vastly underestimated my paranoia and my preparation. He destroyed physical hardware. He did not realize that a software developer who audits the medical industry operates with military-grade redundancies. Julian followed me downstairs carrying 2 large mugs of black coffee. He set them down on the long oak table we used for folding laundry. Within 3 hours, we had completely transformed the basement into a temporary secure data center. I unpacked my emergency backup laptops, connected them to our fiber optic network, and booted up my proprietary auditing software. Every line of code, every client database, and every algorithm my company owned was safely backed up on an encrypted, decentralized cloud network. Desmond had accomplished nothing but making me angry. And an angry auditor is the most dangerous enemy a white-collar criminal can have. I sat down in the folding chair, cracked my knuckles, and stared at the glowing monitors. It was time to go nuclear. I was going to rip their entire operation apart down to the last cent. I started by pulling up the public tax records for the Ghana Medical Mission. Non-profit organizations operating in the United States are required by federal law to file a Form 990. This document discloses their annual revenues, their operational expenses, and their highest-paid vendors. I downloaded the forms for the past 3 years. On paper, Desmond had filed the paperwork flawlessly. To the untrained eye or to a gullible church congregation, the charity looked like a shining beacon of global philanthropy. According to their own filings, the foundation had taken in over $3 million in tax-deductible donations over a 24-month period. The reports claimed that 80% of those funds were spent directly on purchasing life-saving surgical equipment, high-grade antibiotics, and pediatric hospital beds. The filings listed a massive medical supply distributor based in Delaware as their primary vendor. I highlighted the name of the Delaware distributor and ran it through my proprietary software. My algorithm was designed to chew through public corporate registries, cross-reference state tax filings, and flag administrative anomalies. I hit the Enter key and watched the green code cascade down my screen. The results came back in less than a minute. The medical distributor did not actually exist. It was a shell company. It was a ghost entity registered to a cheap post office box inside a rundown strip mall outside of Wilmington. There was no warehouse. There were no hospital beds. There were no antibiotics. I leaned closer to the monitor, the coffee completely forgotten. I hacked deeper into the routing numbers associated with the charity's public expense reports. I bypassed the standard firewalls and traced the digital footprints of the outgoing wire transfers. I mapped out the entire anatomy of the scam right there in my basement. Desmond, acting as the chief financial officer of the charity, was creating phantom invoices. He was generating incredibly detailed, highly convincing fake purchase orders for hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of medical supplies. He would then officially approve the payments himself. Once the money left the charity's bank account, it was wired directly to the shell company in Delaware. But the money did not stop in Delaware. I followed the digital breadcrumbs across international banking nodes. Desmond was systematically funneling the donor funds out of the shell company and routing them into a complex web of offshore accounts located in the Cayman Islands. He was washing the money. He was taking the generous donations from my parents' wealthy friends, from our church congregation, and from the community, and he was hiding it in untraceable international vaults. The sheer scale of the fraud hit me like a physical blow. Kiara was not just a narcissist lying about being a doctor to get attention at country club dinners. She and Desmond were running a highly sophisticated, multi-million-dollar international Ponzi scheme. They were using the emotional appeal of sick children in Africa to fund a criminal enterprise. And my parents were their biggest, most vocal, most gullible investors. Julian stood behind my chair, his hands resting on my shoulders, his eyes reading the data scrolling across the monitors. He let out a low, quiet whistle. "They are stealing everything," Julian said, his voice laced with disbelief. "Every single dollar they collect. This is not just fraud, Charmaine. This is massive federal money laundering. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division is going to bury them under a federal penitentiary." I nodded, my eyes locked on the Cayman Island routing numbers. "And my father is planning to sign over a $2 million commercial property to them next weekend. Harrison thinks he is donating land to build a charity headquarters. Desmond is going to liquidate that property the second the ink is dry, funnel the cash through Delaware, and they are going to disappear. They had ruined my business, threatened my child, and completely alienated me from my parents. But looking at the undeniable proof on my screens, I realized I held the power to destroy their entire universe. I just needed to package the evidence perfectly. I needed to assemble a guillotine so sharp they would not even feel the blade drop until it was too late. I spent the next 6 hours compiling everything. I linked the suspended fraudulent medical license to the fake x-rays. I tied the phantom Delaware invoices to the Cayman Island accounts. I built an undeniable, mathematically perfect dossier of federal crimes. I printed every single page, the printer humming steadily in the quiet basement, churning out the heavy stack of documents that would serve as Kiara and Desmond's one-way ticket to federal prison. Just as the final page printed, my cell phone vibrated violently against the wooden table, shattering the quiet focus of the room. I glanced at the screen. It was Vance, the elite private investigator Julian had hired the day before. I answered on the first ring, immediately putting the call on speakerphone so Julian could hear. Vance. What do you have? I asked, leaning back in my chair and rubbing my tired eyes. Charmaine Julian Vance, said his voice, crisp, steady, and intensely professional over the digital connection. I have a major update on your brother-in-law. The target is on the move. Tell me, Julian said, leaning closer to the phone. According to the family group chat my mother had sent out earlier that week, Desmond was supposed to be halfway across the world. Kiara had tearfully told everyone at the gala that her brave husband was flying to Accra, Ghana for a month to oversee the construction of a new pediatric wing. She had even posted a photo on her social media of Desmond standing at the international terminal at the Atlanta airport holding a duffel bag and waving goodbye. He is not in Africa, Vance stated bluntly. What do you mean he is not in Africa? I asked, my brow furrowing in confusion. Kiara posted the airport photos 3 days ago. We all saw them. He went to the airport, took the photos for his wife's social media, and then he walked right out the lower-level arrivals door and got into a private car, Vance explained smoothly. I pulled the security footage from the terminal. He never passed through a TSA checkpoint. He never boarded an international flight. He never even printed a boarding pass. Then, where is he? Julian demanded, his protective instincts instantly flaring up. He is right here, Vance replied. He is in Atlanta. My stomach dropped. The man who had sent a threatening photograph of my 5-year-old daughter was not thousands of miles away on another continent. He was operating in the shadows of my own city. The realization sent a cold shiver down my spine. The threat to my family was active, and it was local. I have been tailing him since yesterday evening, Vance continued, the sound of a turn signal clicking faintly in the background of his audio. He is highly careful, changes routes, drives rental cars under different corporate names. But he is not careful enough. I just secured his current location. Where exactly is he, Vance? I asked, my voice tightening. Check your phone, Vance said. I am sending you a live GPS pin right now. My phone chimed with a new text message. I opened the application and stared at the glowing blue dot pulsing on the digital map. It was not a hotel near the airport. It was not a quiet suburb. The pin was located in the absolute heart of Midtown Atlanta, hovering over one of the most exclusive, hyper-expensive, luxury high-rise residential buildings in the entire city. I am parked across the street, Vance said over the speaker. He has been up in the penthouse suite for the last 4 hours. You might want to come down here and see this for yourself. You are going to need a camera. I grabbed my coat and my high-resolution digital camera, the one Julian usually used for macro photography. We did not waste a single second. Julian grabbed the keys to his unmarked city vehicle, and we sped out of our quiet suburban driveway, merging aggressively onto the interstate, heading straight into the glowing skyline of Midtown Atlanta. The drive took less than 20 minutes, but my mind was spinning a million miles an hour. Desmond was not just embezzling money. He was living an entirely separate life funded by my parents and the church. Midtown Atlanta. At night is a playground for the wealthy. Towering glass skyscrapers reflect the city lights, surrounded by high-end restaurants and exclusive clubs. Vance had sent us the address to the Sovereign, one of the most heavily guarded, ridiculously expensive residential buildings in the state. You did not just walk into the Sovereign, it had biometric security, 24-hour concierge service, and private elevators. We pulled up to the corner of Peachtree Street and parked in a dark alley a block away. Vance was leaning against a brick wall wearing a nondescript dark jacket blending perfectly into the shadows. He approached our car as we stepped out. "He is still up there," Vance said softly, handing me a small digital tablet displaying a floor plan. "Penthouse Suite B. He leases it under the Delaware Shell Company name. I have a contact inside the building management who owes me a favor." He gave me a temporary keycard that grants access to the VIP parking garage and the private elevator bay serving the top floors. "Let us go," Julian said, his jaw locked tight. We walked briskly to the rear entrance of the massive glass tower. Vance swiped the cloned access card, and the heavy steel door clicked open. We bypassed the glamorous main lobby, entirely stepping into the immaculate, brightly lit underground parking garage reserved exclusively for penthouse residents. The garage looked like a luxury car dealership. Ferraris, Bentleys, and custom Porsches lined the pristine concrete floor. "We need to get eyes on the penthouse level before he leaves," I whispered, clutching my camera tightly. Vance led us to the private elevator bank. He swiped the card again, and the polished brass doors slid open. We stepped inside the mirrored cabin, and Vance pressed the button for the 52nd floor. My stomach dropped as the high-speed elevator shot upward. I checked the battery and memory card on my camera, making sure the settings were perfect for low-light video recording. The elevator chimed softly as we reached the top. The doors opened to a breathtakingly opulent hallway. The walls were lined with dark mahogany paneling and modern art. Thick plush carpets absorbed the sound of our footsteps. There were only 2 doors on this entire floor, Penthouse A and Penthouse B. We positioned ourselves at the far end of the long corridor, slipping into a recessed alcove near the emergency stairwell. It provided the perfect vantage point. We waited in suffocating silence. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The anticipation made my skin crawl. Finally, the heavy double doors of Penthouse B clicked and swung open. I raised my camera, hit the record button, and held my breath. Desmond stepped out into the hallway. He was not wearing the tailored business suits he wore to church, nor the casual travel clothes Kiara had posted on her social media. He was wearing an expensive silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a gold chain resting against his chest, looking completely relaxed and thoroughly arrogant. But he was not alone. A woman stepped out behind him. She was stunning, with long dark hair cascading down her back and flawless glowing skin. She wore a tight designer maternity dress that hugged her curves. She was heavily, undeniably pregnant, easily in her 3rd trimester. Desmond turned to her with a look of absolute adoration. It was a look I had never once seen him give my sister. He reached out gently, placing his hand on her swollen belly, rubbing it affectionately. The woman laughed, a bright, happy sound that echoed down the quiet hallway, and leaned in to kiss him. Desmond wrapped his arms around her, kissing her back deeply and passionately. My hands shook with a volatile mixture of disgust and vindication. I kept the camera perfectly steady, capturing every single frame in crisp, high-definition video. My sister was a cruel, narcissistic fraud, but witnessing the sheer scale of her husband's betrayal was still staggering. Desmond was using Kiara as a shield, letting her play the noble doctor, while he siphoned the millions she raised to fund a secret family in a luxury penthouse. "Ready for dinner, baby?" Desmond asked, his voice carrying clearly down the corridor. "I am starving," the woman replied, slipping her arm through his. "And your son is kicking like crazy. He wants steak." "Whatever my boy wants, my boy gets." Desmond laughed smoothly. "Let us take the new car." They walked toward the elevator bank, completely unaware of the camera lens tracking their every move from the shadows. Vance gestured toward the emergency stairwell. We slipped through the heavy fire doors just as Desmond pressed the elevator button. We practically flew down the concrete stairs, our hearts pounding, racing them back down to the VIP parking garage. By the time we reached the bottom and cracked the stairwell door open, Desmond and his pregnant mistress were stepping out of the elevator. We watched from the darkness of the stairwell as they walked toward a designated parking spot near the exit. Desmond pulled a sleek key fob from his pocket and pressed a button. A brand new top-of-the-line Range Rover autobiography chirped loudly. The custom headlights flared to life, illuminating the pristine white exterior. The vehicle easily cost upwards of $150,000. Vance pulled up an app on his secure tablet and quickly typed in the license plate number of the Range Rover. The registration data populated instantly. He turned the screen toward Julian and me. The vehicle was not registered to Desmond. It was not registered to the mistress. It was registered directly to the Ghana Medical Mission, LLC. He bought his mistress a luxury SUV using the church donation money, I whispered, feeling completely sick to my stomach. He is driving a vehicle funded by people who think they are buying hospital beds for dying children. I aimed the camera through the narrow crack in the stairwell door, zooming in on the license plate, then panning up to capture Desmond opening the passenger door for the pregnant woman. He helped her inside with incredible care, kissed her cheek one more time and walked around to the driver's seat. The powerful engine roared to life, echoing off the concrete walls of the garage. Desmond drove the stolen vehicle up the ramp and disappeared into the Atlanta night. The silence they left behind was heavy and toxic. I stopped recording and looked down at the digital screen on my camera. I had the ultimate weapon resting right in the palm of my hand. I had irrefutable high-definition proof that Desmond was a monster. The financial records I found in my basement proved the fraud, but this video proved the absolute moral bankruptcy of their entire existence. My thumbs hovered over the touchscreen. I pulled up my text messages and found Kiara's contact name. A fierce, dark urge seized my chest. I wanted to send the video to her right now. I wanted to watch the digital delivery receipt confirm she had seen it. I wanted her to know that while she was parading around country clubs pretending to be a savior, her husband was rubbing another woman's pregnant belly in a penthouse bought with her stolen money. I wanted to shatter her perfect, arrogant delusion instantly. I selected the video file. I hit the attach button. My finger hovered right over the send icon. Suddenly, a large, warm hand covered the screen of my camera, gently but firmly pushing it down. I looked up. Julian was staring at me. His eyes were calm, analytical, and terrifyingly cold. It was the look he wore when he was standing over an autopsy table calculating the exact angle of a fatal wound. "Do not do it," Charmaine. Julian said, his voice a low, steady hum in the quiet garage. "Why not?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "She deserves to know." Julian shook his head slowly. "If you send that video now, you give them a chance to scramble. Think about how your family operates. If you warn them privately, your father will instantly go into damage control mode to protect his reputation. They will hire lawyers to quietly divorce Desmond. They will sweep the fraud under the rug. Desmond will flee the country with the Cayman Island money. Do not just break her heart, break the whole syndicate." Julian was right. A private confrontation would only allow them to control the narrative. They had spent their entire lives manipulating the truth to protect their pristine image. If I gave them a head start, Harrison would bury the evidence under a mountain of expensive non-disclosure agreements. Desmond would vanish into the wind, and Kiara would somehow twist the story to make herself the tragic victim of a cheating husband. I needed to trap them all at once in a public arena where they could not escape. We drove back to our house in the suburbs. The security contractors nodded to us as we pulled into the driveway. I went straight back down to my basement data center. I sat in my chair and stared at the digital files I had compiled. The offshore accounts and the fake medical distributor proved the financial fraud. The video of the pregnant mistress proved Desmond was a monster. But I still needed the final piece of the puzzle. I needed to prove Kiara was fully complicit in the theft. Up until this point, a clever defense attorney could argue that Kiara was just a naive doctor whose husband had embezzled the funds behind her back. I needed undeniable proof that she was the co-architect of the entire scam. I leaned my head back, rubbing my temples. How do I get inside their daily communications? Desmond was too smart to use his company email for anything incriminating. Suddenly, a memory flashed through my mind. 4 years ago, our entire family had taken a miserable forced vacation to a luxury resort in the Bahamas. Harrison had demanded it for a family portrait. During that trip, Desmond had dropped his phone in the ocean. To keep up with his supposed charity emails, he had borrowed an old iPad I kept in my travel bag. I had created a temporary user profile for him on my family iCloud account so he could download his apps. He had used it for the rest of the week and handed it back to me at the airport. He never wiped the device. I shot out of my chair and sprinted upstairs to the hallway closet. I dug through a plastic storage bin filled with old electronics and tangled charging cables. At the bottom of the bin, under a stack of obsolete hard drives, was the silver iPad. I grabbed it and ran back down to the basement. I plugged the tablet into my computer tower and forced a hard boot. The battery was completely dead, but as soon as the Apple logo appeared on the screen, my heart began to race. Because the iPad was still registered to my master iCloud account, I could bypass the lock screen using my own administrative credentials. The home screen loaded. I immediately opened the settings menu. Desmond had indeed signed out of his primary Apple ID, but he had made a fatal, arrogant mistake. He had not unlinked the device from the shared cloud backup I had set up during the Bahamas trip. My proprietary auditing software included a digital forensics tool designed to recover fragmented data from synced devices. I tethered the iPad to my main server and ran the extraction protocol. The software bypassed the standard user interface and dug directly into the hidden cache files. 10 minutes later, the progress bar hit 100%. A massive folder appeared on my desktop monitor. It contained over 2,000 images automatically synced from Desmond's phone to the cloud over the last 4 years. I opened the folder and began scrolling. At first, it was just boring charity event photos and pictures of his luxury watches. But then I noticed a subfolder labeled Receipts. I double-clicked it. It was not a folder of financial receipts, it was a digital graveyard of screenshots. Desmond was incredibly paranoid. He was screenshotting his most volatile text messages and saving them as leverage, probably to protect himself if Kiara ever tried to throw him under the bus. I opened the first screenshot. It was a WhatsApp conversation between Desmond and Kiara dated 6 months ago. The messages were explicit, brutal, and utterly damning. I leaned closer to the monitor, reading the text exchange that completely destroyed the illusion of their perfect marriage. The first message was from Kiara. She was furious, but not about the cheating. "Tell your pathetic girlfriend to stop posting pictures of the baby nursery on her public Instagram," Kiara had typed. "My mother's friends follow her. If anyone connects the timeline, the church board will pull the $200,000 grant. Do you want to lose the Cayman's account?" Desmond had replied less than a minute later. "Relax," she blocked them. "Just keep playing the supportive wife at the gala next week. You need my financial signature to authorize the land transfer from your idiot father." Kiara responded immediately. "Just make sure you transfer my $50,000 monthly allowance by Tuesday. I earned it for putting up with your disgusting side family. And remind the Delaware guys to generate a new invoice for pediatric beds. We need to show Pastor Sterling a paper trail before he writes the check." I sat frozen, staring at the glowing words. Kiara knew everything. She knew about the pregnant mistress. She knew about the Delaware Shell Company. She was not a victim of Desmond's deception. She was his active business partner. She was allowing him to use the charity funds to support a secret family, and in exchange he was paying her a massive cut of the stolen money to stay legally married to him. They were a synthetic power couple bonded only by greed and mutual blackmail. I scrolled down to the next batch of screenshots. These were older, dating back almost 3 years. The context of these messages shifted away from the mistress and focused entirely on Kiara's fake medical career. Desmond had sent Kiara a link to an investigative article about a doctor being arrested for practicing without a license. His accompanying text message was laced with panic. "Did you actually shred the suspension letters from the Massachusetts Medical Board?" Desmond asked. "If the feds ever audit the charity, they will find out you failed out of your 2nd year of residency," Kiara replied with chilling arrogance. "I burned them. No one is going to audit us. My father plays golf with the governor. I am the golden child, remember? As long as I keep crying about starving children in Africa, these rich fools will keep writing checks. I have not stepped foot in a hospital in 10 years, and they still call me a hero." The absolute sociopathy of her words made my skin crawl. She had not practiced medicine in a decade. She had completely failed out of her surgical residency in her second year, likely due to the same laziness and entitlement she had displayed her entire life. Instead of admitting failure to our demanding parents, she had forged a license, stolen an identity, and built a multi-million-dollar empire of lies. My sister was a phantom doctor running a ghost charity. I downloaded every single screenshot. I organized them into chronological order, pairing the text messages about the Cayman's account with the bank routing numbers I had found earlier. I paired the text messages about her failing medical school with the suspended federal NPI records. The puzzle was complete. The guillotine was fully assembled, and the blade was razor-sharp. I reached for my coffee mug, feeling the exhaustion finally creeping into my bones. The digital clock on the bottom corner of my screen read 3 in the morning. I had everything I needed to burn their world to the ground. I just needed the perfect stage to light the match. Suddenly, my cell phone screen lit up on the desk, buzzing violently against the wood. I picked it up, expecting a message from Vance. It was not Vance. It was the family group chat. Harrison had just sent a massive multi-paragraph text message to the entire extended family, completely ignoring the fact that it was the middle of the night. I opened the message and read my father's booming, authoritative words. Family, I am thrilled to announce the crowning achievement of the Wilson legacy, Harrison wrote. Next Saturday evening, Elaine and I will be hosting an exclusive estate gifting gala at the downtown Ritz-Carlton. In front of the mayor, Pastor Sterling, and our most esteemed colleagues, I will be legally signing over the deed to the $2 million commercial plot in Buckhead to Kiara's charity. This land will serve as the new global headquarters for the Ghana Medical Mission. Attendance is mandatory for all family members. I stared at the text. $2 million. That was the absolute endgame. Desmond and Kiara were not just skimming donations from rich fools anymore. They were going for the ultimate score. They were going to take the deed to my parents' most valuable commercial property, liquidate it through the Delaware Shell Company funnel, the massive pile of cash into the Cayman Island accounts, and permanently flee the country before anyone realized the clinic was a lie. Next Saturday. I had exactly 6 days to stop the biggest heist in our family history. I smiled a dark, cold smile. I replied to the group chat with a single word. Confirmed. Let the games begin. I would be there fully ready to destroy them. The next morning, I did not sleep a single wink. The sun rose over the Atlanta skyline, casting a pale, cold light through the high basement windows. I sat perfectly still at my desk, surrounded by empty coffee mugs and the steady hum of my powerful servers. Julian came downstairs at 6 o'clock, dressed in his dark running gear. He took one look at my face and knew the verdict. "We are not warning them," I said, my voice hoarse, but completely steady. Harrison would just hire a team of corporate fixers to bury the evidence forever to protect his image. He would rather cover up a massive federal crime than face a public scandal in his social circle. And if Desmond gets even a tiny whisper of an audit, he will empty the Cayman Island accounts immediately. He will vanish with his pregnant girlfriend before the sun sets, leaving my parents completely bankrupt and humiliated. We have to trap them where they cannot escape. Julian nodded slowly, walking over to massage my incredibly tense shoulders. Then we need to build a cage they cannot break out of. I spent the next 48 hours meticulously assembling the digital dossier. I treated it exactly like one of my corporate medical audits, leaving zero room for interpretation or legal loopholes. I created 4 primary master folders on my secure encrypted drive. Folder 1 contained the complete history of Kiara's medical fraud. It included the state medical board expulsion records, the suspended registry screenshots, and the forged license she had so arrogantly framed. Folder 2 mapped the financial embezzlement perfectly. This held the fake invoices from the phantom Delaware distributor Cross, referenced with the corresponding wire transfers authorized entirely by Desmond's own digital signature. The paper trail was absolutely undeniable and flawless. Folder 3 traced the complex international money laundering, detailing every single dollar funneled into the offshore Cayman Island vaults. Folder 4 was the final devastating nail in their shared coffin. It contained the complete archive of their saved iCloud text messages. This proved Kiara's absolute complicity in the entire operation. It proved she knew about the pregnant mistress, the stolen charity funds, and the fake hospital beds. It completely shattered the fragile illusion of the naive, victimized wife she played so well. Once the digital files were perfectly organized, I transferred everything onto 3 separate encrypted flash drives, carefully. I did not trust standard email servers for evidence of this magnitude. I also needed to bypass local authorities entirely. My father had far too much influence over the city police and the state judges. He played golf with them every Sunday. He funded their political campaigns generously. If I handed this massive case to the local precinct, the files would conveniently disappear into thin air, and I would likely be arrested for corporate espionage. I needed federal jurisdiction immediately. I needed the apex predators of the financial world to tear their entire fraudulent criminal empire straight to the ground. I opened a highly secure encrypted browser on my terminal and navigated directly to the official whistleblower portal for the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. The federal agents there do not care about your local country club status or your fancy church connections. They only care about undeclared millions and massive tax fraud. I filled out the anonymous submission forms, quickly attaching the heavy financial ledgers, the Cayman Island routing numbers, and the fake Delaware Shell Company registration. I made sure every single document was perfectly legible and cross-referenced for the federal auditors to review easily. But I did not stop there. I opened a second tab and accessed the confidential tip line for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, specifically targeting the white-collar crime unit located in the Atlanta field office. I uploaded Kiara's fake medical credentials, the extensive wire fraud evidence, and the brutal extortion texts between her and Desmond. I hit the final submit buttons on both federal portals simultaneously. The large monitors flashed a bright green, confirming the successful receipt of the massive data packets. I leaned back heavily in my chair, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my tired ribs. The massive federal machinery was now officially in motion. However, I knew government bureaucracy moved incredibly slowly. A digital submission might sit in a queue for weeks before a single agent opened it. I did not have weeks. I had exactly 5 days until Harrison signed over a $2 million property to these monsters. I needed to force the feds to move faster. I picked up my cell phone and called Vance immediately. When he answered the phone, I gave him a very specific and highly urgent set of instructions to follow without asking any questions at all. Vance had spent 15 long years as a dedicated federal agent before going private. He still had powerful friends working in the bureau. Friends who owed him huge favors and trusted his sharp intelligence implicitly. "I am sending you a fast courier with 2 encrypted flash drives," I told Vance clearly. "One is for the lead investigator at the IRS. The other is for your direct contact at the FBI. Tell them this is a multi-million-dollar international Ponzi scheme involving charity fraud, and the perpetrators are planning to liquidate a massive commercial asset this coming Saturday night." Vance let out a low, deeply amused chuckle over the phone. "Consider it completely done, Charmaine. They are going to absolutely love this case." The next few days felt exactly like walking through deep, freezing water. The tension in our house was unbelievably palpable. Julian and I went about our normal daily routines, carefully taking Maya to preschool, eating dinner quietly, and watching the evening news, but the air crackled constantly with heavy, unspoken anticipation. Our private security detail remained stationed safely outside. The armed guards were a constant reminder of the high stakes. I watched my sister's social media accounts closely like a hawk. Kiara was posting incessantly online. She uploaded bright photos of herself touring the Buckhead commercial property with a professional team of architects pointing at empty patches of green grass, pretending to plan where the fake pediatric recovery rooms would be built. Her daily captions were sickeningly sweet, publicly thanking our parents for their incredible generosity and praising God for the wonderful opportunity to expand her medical mission. Desmond commented on every single post with fake heart emojis. He played the perfect role of the endlessly supportive husband brilliantly. It was a masterclass in sociopathic deception. They were so incredibly confident in their scam. They genuinely believed they had won the war. They thought they had successfully neutralized me forever by smashing my business servers and threatening my young child. They thought the coast was completely clear to steal everything. On Thursday afternoon, the mail carrier dropped a large stack of letters through the brass slot in our front door. I sifted through the boring bills and junk mail until I found a thick, heavy white envelope. It was made of expensive cream cardstock. It was the official physical invitation to the estate gifting gala at the downtown Ritz-Carlton Hotel. The dark ink calligraphy was incredibly elegant, spelling out my parents' names proudly as the generous hosts. But securely attached to the back of the formal invitation was a bright yellow sticky note. The handwriting clearly belonged to my mother, Elaine. It was written in sharp, incredibly aggressive strokes that dug deeply into the soft paper. I stared at the note, my blood running completely cold at the sheer audacity of her nasty words. The note read, "You are strictly required to attend this gala and clap for your sister. We expect you to sit at table 3 and smile nicely for the professional photographers. We will not tolerate any more of your jealous outbursts or psychotic accusations. If you do not show up and support this family publicly, you can consider yourself permanently dead to us. Do not ever call us again." I read the awful note 3 times. The manipulative cruelty of my mother was truly astonishing. She was using the massive threat of permanent excommunication to force me into participating. She wanted me to be a quiet prop in Kiara's victory lap. She wanted me to sit down while Desmond stole millions just to protect the aesthetic perfection of the Wilson family image. I walked directly into the kitchen, grabbed a black pen, and pulled the RSVP card from the envelope. The card had a simple checkbox for attendance and a blank line to write the exact number of guests. I firmly checked the box that said joyfully attending, then I moved my pen down to the guest line. I did not just write Julian's name down there. That morning, Vance confirmed my family's absolute worst fears. His federal contacts had reviewed every file on the flash drives. The prosecutors were staggered by the sheer volume and undeniable precision of the digital evidence. They had immediately secured emergency warrants to freeze the offshore Cayman Island accounts and authorize full arrests. But they needed a highly controlled environment to execute the takedown smoothly without giving Desmond a chance to run or destroy devices. I smiled down at the cream cardstock. On the extra guest line, I proudly wrote the number 2. My +2 were not going to be friends. My +2 were going to be 2 senior federal agents from the United States government. I sealed the envelope tightly and quickly dropped it in the outgoing mail. They wanted a beautiful, unforgettable night of absolute high society drama. They were going to get exactly what they asked for right now. Saturday evening arrived with a heavy, suffocating humidity that clung to the Atlanta skyline. The downtown Ritz-Carlton was transformed into a fortress of extreme wealth and aggressive social climbing. Valets in crisp white uniforms sprinted back and forth across the pristine driveway, opening the heavy doors of armored Maybachs, custom Bentleys, and stretched limousines. Flashbulbs popped blindingly near the red carpet entrance as local society photographers captured the arrival of the city elite. I stepped out of our car, smoothing the cool fabric of my emerald green silk evening gown. I had chosen this dress specifically because it was sharp, elegantly structured, and felt exactly like a suit of armor. Julian walked around the vehicle and offered me his arm. He wore a perfectly tailored midnight blue tuxedo, his jaw set in a hard, uncompromising line. He looked less like a medical professional attending a charity dinner and more like a soldier preparing to walk directly into a hostile war zone. Behind us, another nondescript black sedan pulled up smoothly to the curb. 2 men stepped out. They wore standard dark evening wear, blending effortlessly into the massive sea of wealthy donors, but their rigid posture immediately gave them away to anyone paying close attention. They moved with a calculated awareness, their eyes constantly scanning the perimeter. These were my official +2 guests. Special Agent Miller from the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division, and Special Agent Davis from the Federal Bureau of Investigation White Collar Crime Unit. Vance had arranged for them to attend entirely undercover, posing casually as private security consultants for Julian and me. They gave me a brief, almost imperceptible nod before melting seamlessly into the crowd heading toward the grand hotel entrance. We walked through the towering glass doors and into the spectacular main lobby. The air conditioning was freezing, heavily scented with expensive floral arrangements. We made our way toward the grand ballroom where the estate gifting gala was already in full swing. The sheer scale of the event was nauseating. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the soaring ceiling, casting a warm, golden glow over 50 circular tables draped in white silk. A classical string quartet played softly in the corner, entirely drowned out by the loud, boastful chatter of the attendees. I scanned the room and immediately spotted the guests of honor holding court near the main stage. Kiara and Desmond were completely surrounded by a flock of admiring politicians, wealthy socialites, and church board members. They were absolutely dripping in designer clothing, blatantly flaunting the wealth they had stolen from these exact people. Kiara wore a breathtaking custom beaded couture gown that easily cost $20,000. Around her neck sat a thick, sparkling diamond tennis necklace. Desmond stood proudly beside her, wearing a bespoke velvet dinner jacket and a rare luxury watch that practically blinded anyone who looked at it. They looked like royalty. They were laughing, sipping expensive champagne, and soaking in the absolute adoration of the crowd. Every single diamond, every thread of silk, and every drop of champagne was paid for by the phantom hospital beds in Delaware. As Julian and I approached the entrance of the ballroom, my mother stepped directly into our path, physically blocking us from walking any further. Elaine looked resplendent in a silver designer gown, but her face was twisted into a mask of pure, bitter contempt. She held a crystal glass in one hand and placed her other hand firmly on her hip, looking me up and down with absolute disgust. "I am honestly shocked you actually showed up," Charmaine Elaine said loudly, her voice piercing through the ambient noise of the crowd. Several guests standing nearby turned their heads to watch the confrontation. "You usually find a way to ruin these beautiful moments for our family." "I promised I would be here, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice incredibly calm and perfectly level. "I would not miss this night for anything in the world." Elaine scoffed loudly, rolling her eyes. "Just make sure you stay out of the photographs. Tonight is about your sister. Look at her over there." She gestured grandly toward Kiara, raising her voice even louder so the surrounding donors could hear every single word. "She is a true angel on earth. Kiara makes so many incredible sacrifices for the motherland. She works her fingers to the bone saving dying children while you sit in a comfortable office counting your pennies. You should be down on your knees thanking God that you have a sister who brings such incredible prestige and honor to the Wilson family name." I looked past my mother, locking eyes briefly with Kiara across the crowded room. Kiara gave me a smug, victorious little wave. Desmond leaned in and whispered something in her ear, making her throw her head back and laugh. "You are absolutely right, Mom," I said softly, turning my attention back to Elaine. "Tonight is going to be incredibly memorable for the Wilson family name. We will all remember this night for the rest of our lives." Elaine glared at me, completely missing the heavy, dangerous promise hidden beneath my words. "Go find your assigned seats at table 3 in the back corner," she snapped, waving her hand dismissively. "And keep your mouth shut." Julian gently placed his hand on the small of my back, guiding me away from my mother and toward our assigned table. We walked through the maze of silk-covered tables, nodding politely to distant relatives and church acquaintances who offered us tight, uncomfortable smiles. The rumor mill had clearly been working overtime. Desmond and Kiara had successfully painted me as the bitter, jealous outcast, and the entire room was treating me like a volatile explosive they hoped would not detonate. We took our seats near the heavy velvet curtains at the very back of the room. Agents Miller and Davis sat down quietly at the adjacent table, nursing glasses of sparkling water, their eyes locked firmly on Desmond. The dinner service began. Waiters in white gloves served courses of caviar butter, poached lobster, and perfectly seared filet mignon. The extravagance was disgusting when you considered the supposed cause they were celebrating. I pushed the food around my expensive porcelain plate, my stomach completely tied in tight, anxious knots. For 2 excruciating hours, I sat there and watched the absolute peak of my family's arrogance unfold. Pastor Sterling took the stage and delivered a booming, highly emotional prayer, thanking the heavens for the miraculous healing hands of Dr. Chiara. He dramatically announced the church's $200,000 grant, presenting Desmond with a massive oversized novelty check right there on the stage. Desmond accepted it with a humble bow, wiping a fake tear from his eye. The crowd stood up and cheered wildly. I watched Agent Davis pull out his phone under the table, quietly typing out a message, likely instructing his team outside to log the physical check as additional federal evidence of wire fraud. Finally, the main event arrived. The waitstaff cleared the dessert plates, and the ballroom lights dimmed significantly. A single bright spotlight illuminated the polished wooden podium at the center of the main stage. The ambient chatter in the massive room quickly faded into an excited, hushed silence. My father Harrison walked up the steps to the stage. He looked incredibly proud, his chest puffed out, soaking in the absolute attention of Atlanta's most elite citizens. Trailing right behind him was the senior partner of his high-priced corporate law firm, carrying a thick leather portfolio containing the legally binding property deeds. Harrison tapped the microphone twice, sending a sharp thud echoing through the expensive sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, family and friends." Harrison began, his deep voice radiating with authority and immense pride. "We are gathered here tonight to celebrate more than just charity. We are here to celebrate legacy. For decades, the Wilson family has been blessed with abundance. But true abundance means nothing if it is not shared with those who are suffering in the darkest corners of the world." The audience murmured in respectful agreement. Chiara stood near the podium, looking up at her father with wide, adoring eyes, playing the role of the humble, grateful daughter to absolute perfection. Desmond stood right behind her, his eyes locked hungrily on the leather portfolio resting on the podium. "My daughter, Dr. Chiara, has dedicated her entire brilliant medical career to serving the less fortunate." Harrison continued, his voice swelling with emotion. "She has sacrificed her comfort to build clinics, provide medicine, and perform life-saving surgeries on children who have absolutely nothing. Her foundation, the Ghana Medical Mission, is a shining beacon of hope. But a mission needs a permanent home. It needs a foundation built on solid rock." Harrison grabbed the heavy gold pen. He smiled broadly at the audience. Just as the pen touches the paper, the audio system in the ballroom crackles. A sharp whine of feedback pierces the elegant silence. Harrison freezes the heavy gold pen hovering a millimeter above the signature line of the legal deed. He taps the microphone aggressively, looking annoyed at the sound technician in the back corner. But the regular technician is no longer sitting at the soundboard. The young man has been quietly relieved of his duties by Agent Miller, who currently has a small, heavily encrypted flash drive plugged directly into the main audiovisual console. Suddenly, the massive crystal chandeliers hanging above us completely cut out. The grand ballroom is plunged into sudden, startling darkness. A collective murmur of genuine confusion ripples through the hundreds of wealthy guests. Waiters stop dead in their tracks, holding heavy silver trays of expensive champagne, unsure of exactly where to step. Then the giant projector screen behind Harrison flares to life, bathing the stage in a harsh light. It does not show a beautifully edited montage of smiling children recovering in African villages. It does not display the proposed architectural blueprints for the new medical clinic wing. Instead, the screen illuminates the room with crisp, high-definition footage of the dimly lit VIP parking garage beneath the Sovereign high-rise in Midtown Atlanta. The video is blown up to gigantic proportions, making the figures on the screen absolutely impossible to ignore. A collective breath is drawn by the captive audience as the heavy metal doors of the private elevator slide open on the screen. Desmond steps out. He is not wearing his humble charity suit. He is wearing an expensive silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a heavy gold chain catching the fluorescent light. Stepping out right behind him is the stunning, heavily pregnant woman wearing a tight designer maternity dress. The ballroom goes dead silent. You could hear a single pin drop on the thick carpet. On the giant screen, Desmond turns to the beautiful woman and places his hand lovingly on her swollen belly. The audio, enhanced and perfectly equalized by Julian's advanced forensic software, booms forcefully out of the massive concert speakers flanking the stage. "Ready for dinner, baby." Desmond's voice echoes through the Ritz-Carlton ballroom loud and crystal clear. "I am starving," the woman on the screen replies, laughing brightly. "And your son is kicking like crazy today. He wants an expensive steak." "Whatever my boy wants, my boy gets." Desmond laughs smoothly, kissing her cheek. "Let us take the new car." At the front of the ballroom, I watch my father take a sudden stumbling step backward. The gold pen slips entirely from his trembling fingers, clattering loudly against the wooden podium. Elaine rises slowly from her chair at table 1, her hands flying up to cover her mouth in unadulterated horror. The footage cuts to the pair walking toward the sleek, brand-new Range Rover. As Desmond opens the passenger door for the pregnant woman, she pauses with a small, concerned frown. "Are you absolutely sure you do not need to be at that church thing tonight?" she asks on the video. "You said your father-in-law was getting antsy about the big land transfer." Desmond on the massive screen throws his head back and lets out a loud, incredibly arrogant laugh. It is a cruel, mocking sound that slices violently through the tense air of the ballroom. "Harrison Wilson is a complete gullible fool," Desmond's voice booms over the speakers. The words hit my father like a physical blow. He actually recoils, clutching his chest. He is so desperate to buy his way into heaven and impress his elite country club friends that he does not ask a single financial question. And his idiot wife Elaine is even worse. She just wants to brag to her social circle about her saintly doctor daughter. Those pathetic church folks, Pastor Sterling and his entire blind board, they practically throw their loaded checkbooks at us. They are paying for this luxury car, baby. They are paying the rent on our penthouse. And next Saturday, when old Harrison signs over that Buckhead commercial property, we are immediately liquidating it, routing the cash straight to the Cayman Islands and taking a very long permanent vacation. The pregnant woman giggles loudly, sliding into the rich leather seat of the luxury SUV. "I cannot believe they actually buy the whole starving children in Africa story. It is hilarious. People will believe whatever makes them feel good about themselves." Desmond replies callously, slamming the heavy car door shut. The video freezes on his smug, grinning face, staring triumphantly through the windshield. For 10 agonizing seconds, the grand ballroom remains plunged in absolute suffocating silence. It is the terrible silence of 300 incredibly wealthy, powerful people simultaneously realizing they have been systematically conned, mocked, and robbed blind by the golden couple of Atlanta. Then the room completely and violently erupts into absolute chaos. It starts with the sharp, distinct sound of a shattered crystal glass, as a prominent socialite drops her expensive champagne flute directly onto the marble floor. Then the furious shouting begins. Wealthy donors leap from their assigned seats, their faces turning bright red with righteous, humiliated rage. Board members of the Greater Light Fellowship turn aggressively toward Pastor Sterling, screaming, demanding questions about the church accounts. The pastor himself is gripping the edge of his table, his face a pale, sickly shade of gray, realizing his $200,000 grant has just paid for a secret mistress's luxury vehicle. On the stage, Desmond is frozen solid. The charming, smooth-talking financial officer is completely paralyzed, his eyes darting frantically around the dark room, looking for an immediate exit. But the main doors are currently blocked by the Ritz-Carlton security staff, who have quietly taken their direct orders from Agents Miller and Davis. The federal agents are standing casually by the exit signs, their hands resting near their suit jackets, perfectly prepared to intervene if the suspects attempt to flee the building. Harrison grips the sides of the podium, his knuckles turning stark white. He looks like he is rapidly aging 20 years in a matter of seconds. Elaine is hyperventilating, loudly falling back heavily into her chair as nearby socialites actively back away from her table, desperate to physically distance themselves from the explosive radioactive scandal. But Kiara is not paralyzed. She has spent her entire life expertly manipulating reality, and she immediately launches into the most desperate theatrical performance of her fraudulent career. She aggressively grabs the microphone from the podium, practically shoving our devastated father out of the way to reach it. "Do not listen to this!" Kiara screams into the microphone, her voice shrill, high, and panicked, cutting right through the angry roar of the crowd. "It is a terrible lie. It is a complete malicious fabrication." The crowd stops shouting for a brief moment, confused by her sudden, fiercely aggressive outburst. Kiara points a violently trembling finger directly toward the back of the room, aiming it straight at the shadowy table where Julian and I are sitting. The spotlight operator, sensing the peak drama, wildly swings the bright white beam across the room, illuminating my emerald green dress and Julian's sharp tuxedo for everyone to see. "Look at her!" Kiara shrieks, hot tears streaming rapidly down her flawless face. She is crying real tears now, but they are tears of sheer terror, not betrayal. "Look at my sister Charmaine. She has always hated me. She has been insanely jealous of my successful medical career since we were children. She owns a sophisticated software company. She knows exactly how to manipulate computers and data. That video is a fake. It is a malicious AI deepfake she created to ruin my charity and destroy my beautiful marriage. You all read the news. You know what artificial intelligence can do these days. She fed photos of my husband into a computer program to make this horrible, disgusting movie. She wants you to stop donating so children will suffer just to spite me." The ballroom begins to murmur loudly. A few of the older donors, unfamiliar with the complex nuances of digital technology, look uncertainly back and forth between the frozen image of Desmond on the massive screen and Kiara's sobbing, beautiful face on the brightly lit stage. "She hired actors." Kiara wails loudly, clutching her chest dramatically. "She mapped Desmond's face onto someone else. Desmond loves me completely. We are building a massive hospital for dying children, and my wicked, bitter sister is trying to steal the funding by putting on this disgusting digital magic trick. Please, you all know me. I am Dr. Kiara Wilson. I save innocent lives. Do not let her jealous, psychopathic lies stop the Lord's vital work." Elaine, ever desperate to cling to the golden illusion, immediately jumps up from her chair. "She is absolutely right," my mother shouts frantically, her voice cracking with wild desperation. "Charmaine has been actively trying to sabotage this entire family all week. She is deeply unwell and delusional. Somebody arrest her. Somebody throw her out of this hotel right now." Desmond snaps out of his paralyzed state, realizing his wife is throwing him a massive lifeline. He rushes forward, wrapping his arms tightly around Kiara, burying his face in her shoulder. "I would never betray you, my love," he yells into the microphone for the crowd. "This is an evil orchestrated attack on our ministry." The crowd is teetering on the edge. The sheer audacity of Kiara's lie is almost convincing enough to cast a shadow of a doubt. People want to believe in the beautiful, charitable doctor. They do not want to believe they have been played for absolute fools. Julian looks at me. He does not say a word. He simply gives me a single firm nod. The time for hiding in the shadows is over. I push my chair back. It scrapes loudly against the polished wood floor. I stand up slowly, feeling the weight of 300 pairs of eyes suddenly locked onto me. I do not look angry. I do not look unhinged or jealous. I look completely, terrifyingly calm. I step out from behind table 3 and begin walking up the center aisle of the ballroom. The sea of wealthy donors physically parts for me, stepping back, as if I am carrying a live explosive. My emerald gown sweeps across the carpet. My heels click rhythmically against the floor, a steady, inevitable countdown to their total, unavoidable destruction. I can smell the expensive perfumes mixing with the sharp scent of nervous sweat as the elite crowd watches me. The whispering completely dies down as I pass each table. No one dares to intervene. No one dares to speak. I walk past my mother, who is trembling and glaring at me with raw hatred. I walk past Pastor Sterling, who refuses to meet my eye. I walk all the way to the front of the room, stopping directly in front of the main stage. The DJ booth is situated just off to the left of the stairs. The young DJ is staring at me, his mouth hanging slightly open in shock. I reach over the soundboard and gently pluck the wireless backup microphone from his trembling hand. I flip the switch. A small green light blinks to life. I look up at the stage. Kiara is clutching Desmond, her chest heaving. Harrison is staring at me, his face an unreadable mask of devastation and desperate denial. I raise the microphone to my lips. My voice echoes through the massive ballroom, cool, precise, and slicing through the tension like a surgical scalpel. If the video is a fake, I say my words ringing with absolute, undeniable authority. Let us look at your medical degree, doctor. Because unlike artificial intelligence, federal registry suspensions and forged board signatures are incredibly real. And the federal agents standing by the doors right now are very eager to discuss them with you. I lower the microphone slightly, letting silence stretch across the ballroom. I give a sharp nod to Agent Miller at the soundboard. He taps a key on his laptop. The projector screen flickers. The image of Desmond and his mistress vanishes, replaced by the red banner of the Federal Medical Registry. The letters loom over the crowd. NPI suspended. Fraudulent credentials. Look closely at the screen, I announce, my voice echoing off the chandeliers. This is the official federal database for licensed medical professionals. My sister, the surgeon, you have been throwing your money at, is not a doctor. She has not been a doctor for a decade. She failed out of her surgical residency in her second year. The Massachusetts Medical Board permanently revoked her eligibility to practice after discovering she was forging clinical hours and stealing hospital prescription pads. A collective gasp rips through the room. Kiara shakes her head wildly, her perfect updo beginning to unravel. It is a lie, she screams, her voice cracking. I have my license. I showed it to my parents. You showed them a piece of paper you bought online, I counter swiftly. You used the official seal of a governor who died 3 years ago. You are nothing but a phantom doctor running a ghost charity. As for the miraculous surgeries you claim to perform, let me hand the floor over to an actual professional. Julian steps forward from the shadows. He does not need a microphone. His commanding voice projects effortlessly across the silent room. I am the lead forensic pathologist for the state, Julian states firmly. The X-ray Kiara displayed earlier tonight does not belong to an African child. That X-ray is a forensic sample from a 32-year-old homicide victim. I personally autopsied that body 2 years ago in Chicago. The patient died from a point-blank shotgun wound. Your golden doctor is using photos of murder victims to solicit donations. The wealthy donors sitting at the front tables physically recoil in disgust. Several women cover their mouths in absolute horror. The illusion of the heroic medical mission is shattering into a million irreparable pieces right in front of their eyes. But I am not finished. I am here to burn the entire foundation to the ground. I raise the microphone again. Agent Miller switches the slide on the projector. The screen now displays a highly complex, beautifully organized financial flowchart. It maps out every single dollar that has flowed through the Ghana medical mission over the last 3 years. You all thought you were buying hospital beds and high-grade antibiotics, I say, my voice dripping with cold precision. Let me show you exactly what you were buying. Desmond, acting as the chief financial officer, has been generating phantom invoices for years. He funnels your generous donations into a fake medical supply distributor registered to a cheap post office box in Delaware. There are no supplies. There is no clinic in Africa. I point toward the massive screen as the flowchart animates, tracing bright red lines from the Delaware Shell Company. Once your money hits Delaware, Desmond washes it and wires it directly into untraceable offshore accounts located in the Cayman Islands. He is running a massive international Ponzi scheme. Your money is paying for his luxury penthouse, his custom suits, and his secret family. Desmond looks like he is about to vomit. His smooth, arrogant facade has completely melted away, leaving behind a terrified, cornered criminal. He grips the edge of the podium, his knuckles stark white. But Kiara refuses to surrender. She falls to her knees on the stage, burying her face in her hands, launching into a fit of hysterical sobbing. "How could you do this to me, Desmond?" Kiara wails loudly, trying to shift the blame onto her husband. I trusted you with the finances. I wanted to help the children. You lied to me. You betrayed our marriage. I stare at my sister kneeling on the stage. The sociopathy of her performance is almost impressive. She is perfectly willing to throw the father of her nephew under a bus to save her own skin. Save the tears, Kiara. I say, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper that somehow carries across the entire room. You are not a victim. You are the Kyo architect of this entire criminal enterprise. I nod to Agent Miller one last time. The screen flashes again. This time, it displays the crisp screenshots of the WhatsApp text messages I extracted from Desmond's old iPad. The text bubbles are magnified so that even the people standing at the back of the ballroom can read every damning word. Read the screen, I instruct the crowd. These are text messages between the happy couple from 6 months ago. Look at Kiara demanding her $50,000 allowance to tolerate Desmond's pregnant mistress. Look at Kiara reminding Desmond to generate new fake invoices to trick Pastor Sterling into handing over the church grant. The room reads the messages in stunned silence. I watch the exact moment the realization hits Pastor Sterling. The powerful church leader staggers backward, bumping hard into a waiter. His $200,000 grant was a bribe orchestrated by a fake doctor to fund a cheating husband's luxury lifestyle. His reputation is instantly obliterated. Kiara stops crying. The fake tears dry up immediately. She looks up at the screen, reading her own cruel words broadcasted to the entire Atlanta elite. The mask finally slips off completely. Her face turns cold and blank. She slowly stands up, smoothing the front of her expensive couture gown, realizing there is absolutely no escape from her digital footprint. At the edge of the stage, my father Harrison suddenly lets out a sharp gasp. He drops heavily to his knees, clutching his chest with both hands. His face turns an alarming shade of gray. The $2 million property deed lies abandoned on the floor next to him. His precious social standing, his flawless family legacy, and his immense pride have all been completely destroyed in less than 10 minutes. Elaine lets out a piercing shriek. She collapses backward into her chair, her eyes rolling back into her head as she begins to hyperventilate wildly. The matriarch who slapped me in a hallway to protect a fraud is now drowning in the catastrophic ruin of her own blind favoritism. You ruined everything, Desmond suddenly roars. The sound is completely animalistic, filled with raw, desperate panic. He leaps off the front of the stage, bypassing the stairs entirely. He charges straight down the center aisle, aiming directly at me. His hands are outstretched, his eyes wide with violent intent. He realizes his life is over, and he wants to take me down with him. I do not even flinch. I stand perfectly still. Before Desmond can take 3 steps toward me, Julian intercepts him. My brilliant forensic pathologist husband moves with terrifying speed. Julian steps into Desmond's path, grabs him by the lapels of his custom velvet jacket, and uses Desmond's own aggressive momentum against him. Julian twists his hips and throws Desmond violently over a nearby cocktail table. The table shatters instantly. Crystal vases, expensive champagne bottles, and delicate hors d'oeuvres explode across the marble floor in a chaotic shower of glass and liquid. Desmond crashes hard onto his back, the breath knocked completely out of his lungs in a loud wheeze. Julian drops a heavy knee directly onto Desmond's chest, pinning him securely to the floor amidst the broken glass. Julian grabs both of Desmond's wrists, twisting them sharply behind his back, completely neutralizing the threat in seconds. "Get off me!" Desmond screams, thrashing wildly under Julian's crushing weight. His voice is shrill and laced with terror. He spits blood onto the marble floor. "You cannot prove anything. You have screenshots and some fake tax documents. You have no actual proof of where the money went. You cannot trace the offshore accounts." Desmond is screaming so loudly that he does not hear the heavy commotion echoing from the Grand Hotel lobby outside the ballroom. I look down at the pathetic man currently pinned to the cold marble floor. I smile. It is a slow, deeply satisfied smile. "I do not need to trace the Cayman Island accounts manually, Desmond," I say calmly, looking straight into his eyes. "They already did it for me." Suddenly, the massive wooden doors at the back of the incredibly quiet Ritz-Carlton ballroom burst open with explosive force. The heavy mahogany doors crash loudly against the walls. The terrified hotel security staff steps aside immediately. A heavily armed small army of men and women surge rapidly into the room. They are not wearing elegant evening gowns or tailored tuxedos. They are wearing tactical gear, heavy utility belts, and dark navy blue windbreakers. Printed across the jackets in bold yellow letters are two specific acronyms: FBI, IRS. The acronyms hung in the heavy air of the ballroom like a swift, undeniable death sentence. Over 24 federal agents swarmed the opulent space, moving with a highly coordinated, terrifying efficiency that completely shattered the luxurious atmosphere of the Ritz-Carlton. They completely ignored the stunned wealthy socialites in their silk gowns and bespoke tuxedos pushing past the tables, with their hands resting securely on their utility belts. The classical string quartet in the corner had abruptly stopped playing, leaving only the sound of heavy tactical boots marching across the polished marble floor. Desmond was still pinned firmly to the ground by Julian. He did not even try to struggle anymore. The sheer, overwhelming presence of the federal government had entirely drained the fight out of him. Two towering agents in dark navy windbreakers approached the broken cocktail table. Julian stood up smoothly, stepping aside and brushing a stray shard of crystal off his tuxedo jacket. Desmond Wilson, the lead FBI agent, announced, his voice booming over the chaos of the room. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, international money laundering, and tax evasion. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The agent roughly grabbed Desmond by his tailored velvet collar, hauling him up from the floor. Desmond stumbled, his face bruised and his lip bleeding from the brief scuffle. The sharp metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs ratcheting tightly around his wrists echoed loudly in the sudden eerie quiet of the immediate area. Desmond kept his head down, staring blankly at the floor, absolutely refusing to look at the hundreds of former admirers who were now glaring at him with pure, unadulterated disgust. On the main stage, Kiara was completely losing her mind. As two female federal agents quickly marched up the wooden stairs toward her, she began backing away wildly, her high heels catching on the heavy fabric of her expensive couture gown. "No, no, you do not understand," Kiara shrieked, holding her hands up defensively. "I am a doctor. I save children. You are making a terrible mistake. My sister did this. She is lying to you." Kiara Wilson, one of the female agents, said calmly, completely unfazed by the hysterical theatrical performance. "You are under federal arrest for medical fraud, forgery of state documents, and felony wire fraud. Put your hands behind your back immediately." "I will not," Kiara screamed, slapping the agent's hand away in a massive display of sheer entitlement. "Do you know who my father is? He plays golf with the governor. He will have your badges by tomorrow morning." The agents did not hesitate for a single second. They grabbed Kiara's arms with incredible, uncompromising force, twisting them firmly behind her back. Kiara wailed in shock as the cold steel cuffs snapped securely around her wrists, completely trapping her hands over the delicate, intricate beading of her $20,000 dress. The visual contrast was absolutely staggering. Atlanta's golden child, the saintly, untouchable medical savior, was now crying like a spoiled toddler in federal restraints. Mom Kiara sobbed frantically, looking desperately out into the crowd. "Dad, do something. Call the lawyers. Tell them to stop this right now. Please, Mom, do not let them take me." Elaine stood perfectly still near table 1. Her face was entirely drained of color, her eyes wide and sunken. "For 35 years, my mother had relentlessly worshipped at the altar of Kiara's perfection. She had ruthlessly sacrificed my emotional well-being, my business, and my place in the family just to protect the flawless illusion of her favorite daughter. But staring at the giant projector screen displaying the stolen funds and watching the federal agents cuff the child she had idolized, the absolute devastating truth finally pierced through her thick armor of denial." Elaine slowly looked at my father Harrison, who was currently slumped in a chair being attended to by a hotel medic. He was breathing heavily, his hands shaking violently as he stared at the unsigned $2 million property deed lying uselessly on the floor. Kiara had not just lied about being a doctor. She and Desmond had been mere seconds away from stealing my parents' most valuable commercial asset, liquidating their retirement security, and leaving them completely bankrupt to fund a secret family. The profound betrayal was absolute and completely unforgivable. "Mom, please," Kiara begged again, tears streaming down her ruined makeup as the agents began forcefully marching her down the stairs. Elaine looked at Kiara. For the very first time in my entire life, I did not see warmth or fierce protection in my mother's eyes when she looked at her golden child. I saw only deep, horrifying shame. Elaine slowly turned her back. She deliberately turned away from Kiara, burying her face in her trembling hands, refusing to watch her daughter be paraded out of the room. "No," Kiara wailed, the sound completely shattering as she realized her ultimate shield had just abandoned her. "Mom, you cannot turn your back on me." The crowd of wealthy donors had finally recovered from their initial shock and immediately went into a frenzy. Dozens of smartphones were suddenly raised high into the air. The bright flashes of phone cameras illuminated the ballroom as Atlanta's elite eagerly recorded the massive downfall of the Wilson family empire. The footage of Kiara being marched out in handcuffs would be trending across every social media platform before the night was even over. Their pristine social reputation, the only thing my parents truly cared about, was being publicly executed in real time. Amidst the absolute chaos of the arrests, I noticed a figure trying to subtly slip away from the main action. Pastor Sterling was frantically weaving his way through the maze of tables, keeping his head down low, making a desperate beeline for the rear kitchen exit. He was gripping his leather Bible tightly, sweating profusely, clearly hoping to escape the ballroom before anyone associated him with the massive fraud. He almost made it to the swinging double doors. "Excuse me, Pastor," a sharp voice called out. Agent Davis stepped smoothly out from the shadows, physically blocking the exit path. He crossed his arms over his chest, looking the terrified church leader up and down, with a cold, highly analytical stare. "Where exactly are you going in such a hurry?" Agent Davis asked casually. "I just need to use the restroom," Pastor Sterling stammered nervously, his charismatic preaching voice completely vanishing into a weak, high-pitched squeak. "This does not concern the church. We are victims here." "Right." Agent Davis nodded slowly, pulling a small notebook from his jacket pocket. "Well, we have a few questions about that $200,000 grant you just handed over to a known shell company. We also want to discuss the $50,000 donation you received yesterday morning, the one designated for the new church roof. We have reason to believe those funds were obtained through criminal extortion and bribery. You are going to need to come with us to the field office right now to make a highly detailed statement." Pastor Sterling's shoulders slumped entirely in utter defeat. He looked absolutely terrified as another agent stepped forward to escort him out of the building. The powerful, corrupt spiritual leader of the Greater Light Fellowship was going to be answering to federal auditors by midnight. I stood tall in the center of the devastated ballroom, watching the complete collapse of the syndicate that had tried to destroy me. Julian walked over and stood right beside me, wrapping his arm firmly and protectively around my waist. We did not say a word. We just watched. We watched the federal agents forcefully shove Desmond into the back of a dark SUV waiting outside the hotel lobby. We watched Kiara, still crying hysterically in her ruined couture gown, being pushed into the back of a separate federal vehicle. The flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers painted the front of the Ritz-Carlton in chaotic, strobing colors. The loud sirens began to wail, cutting sharply through the humid night air, as the vehicles sped away, taking the two people who had made my life a living hell straight to a federal holding cell. It was completely over. The massive, suffocating weight that had pressed down on my chest for my entire life was finally gone. I looked at Julian, and for the first time in weeks, I genuinely smiled. We turned our backs on the ruined gala, walked out of the hotel, and drove quietly home to our daughter. The night passed in a deep, peaceful blur. For the first time since my childhood, I slept incredibly well, completely untroubled by the toxic demands of my family. But the quiet aftermath did not last very long. The very next morning, the bright Sunday sun was streaming warmly through the large windows of our suburban kitchen. I was standing at the counter calmly pouring a fresh cup of coffee when the heavy brass knocker on our front door suddenly banged loudly. It was not a polite knock. It was frantic, desperate, and incredibly urgent. Julian looked up from his newspaper, his brow furrowing. He stood up immediately and walked out to the main hallway. I followed closely behind him, my hands wrapped tightly around the warm ceramic mug. Julian unlocked the deadbolt and slowly pulled the heavy wooden door open. Standing on our front porch were my parents. Harrison and Elaine looked absolutely nothing like the powerful, arrogant socialites who had hosted the gala just 12 hours ago. They looked like they had aged 20 years overnight. Harrison was wearing the exact same wrinkled dress shirt from the night before, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. His face was deeply lined, his posture completely broken and defeated. Elaine was shaking violently, her eyes red and heavily swollen from crying all night long. "Charmaine!" My mother whispered, her voice cracking painfully as she looked at me with wild, desperate eyes. "Please, we need your help." Harrison swallowed hard, looking down at his expensive leather shoes, before finally meeting my gaze. His pride was entirely gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. "The feds froze all of our bank accounts this morning," Harrison admitted, his voice trembling heavily. "They say we are materially tied to the fraud because we hosted the events. The lawyers are demanding massive retainers we cannot pay. Our friends will not even answer our phone calls. Charmaine, please, you have to forgive us. We were so incredibly wrong about everything. You have to use your software company money to bail Kiara out and help us fight this. You are our only family left." I stood perfectly still in the doorway, staring at the two people who had gleefully thrown me to the wolves just days prior, completely absorbing the sheer, breathtaking audacity of their request. "You want me to pay for her defense?" I repeated slowly, my voice completely devoid of any recognizable emotion. "You want me to use the software company you publicly mocked for an entire decade to bail out the convicted fraudster who literally tried to ruin my life yesterday?" Harrison stepped forward, his hands clasped tightly together in a desperate, pathetic gesture of begging. "Charmaine, you simply do not understand the absolute catastrophe this is causing our family. Our faces are plastered across the front page of every single local newspaper in Atlanta. The country club suspended our membership, pending a formal board review. Pastor Sterling is throwing us under the bus to save his own miserable reputation. If Kiara goes to federal prison, the Wilson name is permanently destroyed. You have the immense financial resources to hire the best white-collar criminal defense firm in the state. We can control the public narrative. We can say she was manipulated by Desmond." I looked at my father. This was the man who had mercilessly extorted me for $50,000 just to protect a lie. He was so completely obsessed with social optics that he did not even care his favorite daughter was a ruthless criminal. He only cared that his wealthy country club friends knew about it. Elaine reached out, tears streaming down her ruined makeup. "Please, Charmaine," she cried out, her voice cracking painfully. "Please save your sister." I gently but firmly brushed my mother's trembling hand away. I took a deliberate, heavy step backward into my own home, physically creating an uncrossable boundary between my peaceful sanctuary and their toxic chaos. "She is not my sister," I said, my tone incredibly calm and completely absolute. "She is a dangerous stranger who just happens to share my DNA. And you are not standing here asking for my help because you actually love her. You are asking for my hard-earned money because you desperately want to buy back the beautiful, flawless illusion you lost last night." "Charmaine, do not do this!" Harrison warned, a brief, pathetic flash of his old, arrogant anger attempting to surface through his overwhelming panic. "Family protects family. That is how we survive." I shook my head slowly, feeling nothing but profound pity for the broken man standing on my porch. "No, Harrison. Family protects family. You protected an image. When I came to you with undeniable federal proof that Kiara was stealing millions from sick children, you slapped me across the face. You maliciously wrote me out of your precious $5 million family trust. You threatened my husband's career. You sent Desmond a clear, undeniable signal that he could destroy my business servers and threaten my innocent 5-year-old daughter, and you would gladly look the other way, as long as the gala went perfectly. You deliberately chose your perfect fake daughter over your actual loyal one. Elaine let out a wounded, suffocating sob, covering her face with both hands. I am completely done. I continued, feeling a profound, incredible sense of absolute closure settling deeply over my heart. I will not give you a single cent for legal defense. I will not attend any upcoming court proceedings. I will not answer any more of your phone calls. I am officially cutting you out of my life completely and permanently. If you ever step foot on my property again, I will have the armed security detail outside escort you away. I reached for the heavy brass handle of my solid wooden front door. Charmaine, wait, Elaine begged, reaching out one last desperate time. I did not wait. I looked at the two toxic people who had given me life but had never given me genuine love, and I closed the door firmly in their faces. The heavy metal deadbolt clicked into place with a loud, incredibly satisfying snap. I turned around in this quiet hallway. Julian was standing near the kitchen entrance holding 2 fresh cups of black coffee. He walked over and handed me a warm mug, kissing my forehead gently. "It is finally over," Julian said softly. I took a deep, refreshing breath, tasting the rich, dark coffee and the incredible, unmatched sweetness of genuine freedom. "Yes," I replied, smiling brightly. "It is finally over." Fast forward exactly 1 full year. The justice system moved with surprising speed. Desmond eagerly took a plea deal to avoid a life sentence. He was formally sentenced to 20 hard years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. His pregnant mistress completely abandoned him the very minute the Cayman Island offshore accounts were formally frozen by the federal government, leaving him with absolutely nothing but massive legal debts and a ruined life. Kiara stubbornly refused to take any kind of plea agreement. She genuinely believed her legendary charm, striking beauty, and perfect fake tears would somehow magically sway a sympathetic federal jury. She was spectacularly and publicly wrong. The diverse jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding her entirely guilty on all 74 counts of massive wire fraud, blatant forgery, and complex money laundering. The strict federal judge angrily sentenced her to 15 hard years in prison, permanently stripping her of every single stolen asset she ever possessed. As for Harrison and Elaine, the massive federal scandal completely bankrupted them both. The IRS mercilessly seized the Buckhead commercial property and all their personal investment accounts to pay back the deeply defrauded charity donors. Stripped entirely of their vast wealth and their heavily protected, prestigious reputation, my parents were immediately forced to downsize into a very small, cramped apartment. My business exploded. Major healthcare conglomerates saw exactly what my proprietary software could uncover. My company tripled in size. Julian became the lead forensic consultant for the entire state. Our daughter Maya finished kindergarten, growing up safely. Cutting off dead weight is not a sign of weakness. It is self-preservation. Build the beautiful, peaceful life you always truly deserve. Thank you so much. The greatest lesson from this story is that sharing DNA does not give anyone the right to manipulate or exploit you. Society conditions us to endlessly forgive toxic family members in the name of blind loyalty. But true loyalty should never require your destruction. Walking away from an abusive environment is not a sign of weakness. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. You have the absolute right to protect your peace, set firm boundaries, and build a beautiful life without guilt. Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic relatives? Share your story below and subscribe now.